Excellent, excellent.
Okay, there we go. All right, can everyone see that? Just give a thumbs up in the chat.
We can see that.
Awesome.
If you hit slideshow, can you hit slideshow and see how that, if that's going to take us to like a full screen?
Yeah, that's what I'm
Or right, top right. Yeah.
There we go.
Beautiful, beautiful. Excellent.
It's been a long day. Thank you.
We're all here together for this. Yes. Thank you so much, everybody who's just joining. Thank you for being here. We are getting started right now. This is our, yep, here we go. More folks joining. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. This is our non-hero talks. This is one of a continuing series where we work with community leaders and people who have a lot to say in the mental health space. We partner with them and give them this platform to work with our community members so that you have an opportunity to learn about what is going on in the mental health realm. You have an opportunity to interact with professionals or people who might be specialized in something that you're interested in. So this is an ongoing series, and we are so thrilled to have a very distinguished guest join us this evening. Anjani Sharma lives on the East Coast, the Space Coast, and represents some of the brightest minds in that Broward County. She joins us virtually today on behalf of Minds Without Borders. This is a huge organization, and as their founder and executive director, Anjani is an Indian American social entrepreneur that is interested in the intersections between public policy and public health. She's a founder and executive director of Minds Without Borders, and she works to make mental health accessible to everyone. Not just that, she goes above and beyond to mentor young girls in her local area, some of the brightest minds on our Space Coast, and she was elected the highest position of the Girls State program. She was a governor in this mock situation where she led over 300 girls in through a mock legislative session. So that just really speaks to the mentorship and the inspirational mind that we are working with today. So we're just so honored to have you to speak with us today. And without any further ado, I'm going to pass it over to our guest speaker. Just a tad bit of housekeeping before we get started. Please remain on mute. If you do have a question, go ahead and raise your hand through the Zoom, or you can put the question in the chat and we will address you as we can. So thank you, Anjani, for being here. Please take us away.
Thank you, Megan, for such a wonderful introduction that I do definitely not deserve, but thank you. And thank you to NAMI Greater Orlando and all of you guys for being here and coming to hear me speak. I'm honored that some of you guys came out on this Monday evening, and I'm excited to share my words. Without further ado, the presentation would be Navigating Youth Mental Health, Empowering Resilience and Well-Being. And I'll go more into the introduction about me, what Minds Without Borders, and etc. Next slide, please. So a little table of contents. I always like to structure this out before we get into the presentation. I want to give you guys a brief introduction about myself, kind of my advocacy and work in the mental health realm, what Minds Without Borders is, what we are doing. Then I want to get into the youth and mental health aspect. That's really important to me because I am a youth, obviously, and mental health, of course, talking about the current status quo. And then I want to get into the resilience importance, how important those two factors play hand in hand together. And then lastly, I want to touch on the advocacy part of it and how important it is to be an advocate about mental health and pay attention to legislation, policies, and etc. So you can go to the next slide. So about me, I mean, Megan put it in perfect words. I'm a senior at West Shore Junior Senior High in the Space Coast. I'm involved in a variety of things, but one thing that I'm most proud of and that I put most of my time in is Minds Without Borders. Minds Without Borders, and we'll talk more on the next slide, is like a passion project for me. It's something that I'm extremely passionate about, and it's involving the youth and advocating for mental health, which at this age, at this, in the current status quo, it's so important that youth have a say in mental health. Alongside with that, I'm interested in politics and public health, like mentioned before. That's why, Minds Without Borders is different in that sense, and you'll see it. And I want to study the intersections. I want to do advocacy work in the future, maybe nonprofit work, and continue, making a positive change on my community in this realm. Next slide, please. So what is Minds Without Borders? It's a long story about how this has started, and I think it's important to touch on because of the remainder of the presentation. So Minds Without Borders is a youth-led nonprofit organization under the 501c3 code dedicated to promote youth mental health, especially among young adults via advocacy and legislation. And we can see the numbers. Minds Without Borders has grown in the past year and a half with over 900 students worldwide, with 18 chapters in states, communities, and countries. We have chapters in India, Egypt, France, and we're growing every single day. How Minds Without Borders started is it was not more than just a personal story. So a lot of you guys know in Florida is one of the only states that actually has a proper mental health curriculum put into place, put by the governor and the Department of Education. But me and my friends, we were in high school, and we thought that this wasn't effective and this wasn't actually treating the root cause of the problem. And one of the other major problems was we didn't feel that students were actually having a say in what's happening to them. I mean, they're trying to adjust, they're trying to correct mental health in youth, but we didn't think students were actually, being able to have a voice in that area. We weren't able to voice what we truly, need as young adults or what experiences we go through. That's when Minds Without Borders kind of evolved. It started first in Brevard County, where we regularly, visited school board meetings. Then, slowly we grew, talking to the school board, having the support from our superintendent, having more students interested in making an impact in the mental health space. And then slowly it grew to different counties, having more students interesting with that social media presence. And I think that's what's really important. We brought together a coalition of students ultimately to actually advocate with their school board members, with their superintendent, with their principal, and then also their state leaders and federal leaders to actually implement correct mental health policies in schools, colleges, and communities. And the way we did it is through advocacy, lobbying, and legislation. So that's what's unique about Minds Without Borders. The goal is to actually create positive change through advocacy, through lobbying, and through speaking up, just like things like this, making sure people are aware of the current issues that youth are facing, making sure that there is awareness around the stigma for students. Like I mentioned before, we've grown rapidly, and one really important cornerstone of Minds Without Borders is the stigmatization. So we know that in other countries, and even still in the US, mental health is extremely stigmatized for all sorts of reasons. That's why when you speak about it and when you have strong student leaders, which Minds Without Borders hopes to facilitate, we hope that there's less stigmatization. Minds Without Borders currently works in schools by having chapters and having a variety of different things, whether it be planning small events of panelists, large-scale community events, partnering with other organizations to actually, help facilitate the mental health aspect, whether it be the Women's Center or March for Our Lives, and ensuring that students have a voice in that mental health realm. It's so important to actually bring together students, and we're built on the basis that students should have a voice in what is affecting them the most. So instead of legislators actually making our policies, we hope that students can actually work hand in hand with these key stakeholders and actually promote policies that can affect positive change and eventually, lessen this huge mental health epidemic. Next slide, please. So now going into the first point of this presentation, I want to talk about youth and mental health. Oftentimes youth can be very, whether it be, high school, middle school, adolescent, or whatever. How I like to define youth and how, it's general, it's ages 12 to 24. I think that this is the most critical period of development, and also most, I would not say neglected, because a lot of individuals are neglected to get mental health care, but most imperative to make sure that these individuals have proper mental health care, proper mental health resources, and etc. The importance of addressing youth mental health is beyond even, speaking about it. It's so important because it impacts the lifelong well-being, educational attainment, and societal contributions. If we don't address youth mental health problems now, then it'll just get worse in the future. That's why it's important to prioritize our youth when considering topics like mental health, because ultimately they will grow up with the same exact, issues. And that's really important to consider. I want to give some statistics that when I was researching and making this presentation, I found alarming, frankly, and just more adds to the reason that we should be passionate youth leaders regarding mental health. So in 2020, more than 4 in 10, that's 42% of students, felt persistently sad or hopeless, and nearly 1/3, 29%, experienced poor mental health. In 2020, more than 1 in 5, 1 in 5, that's 2022 or 20% students seriously considered attempting suicide, and 1 in 10, which is 10%, attempted suicide. Those statistics are not only the aftermath of COVID-19, the pandemic, and etc., but that's been a constant issue since the digital age. And it's important now that youth are actually being considered in this topic. It's not just young adults, it's not just early, adults. Youth are one of the most important people because, like I mentioned before, this critical time of development really cultivates that person. And so that's why youth should really have a stakeholder in all mental health policies, decisions, and etc., because only youth know what they're truly facing in today's status quo. A lot of times when I'm talking to stakeholders, I want to share this fact. I talk to a lot of legislators. I talk to a lot of community leaders who are, of course, elderly than me. And a lot of times they say that they understand what the youth are facing. And of course, when you read about it, you do. But being a youth, it's different. Being, at this age, you really don't understand like what actually happens, the real time, whether it be in school, the school with societal pressures, college applications, dating culture, relationships, all of this, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, all of this cultivates into mental health issues. And it's so important that youth have a say on the table because they're the people who are really suffering. They're the people who really know. And when you listen to them, you can actually effectively change the root of the problem. So next slide, please. So common youth mental health issues. A lot of these you'll see across the spectrum, regardless of the ages, but when researching and, through the students that I work with and who come work for Minds Without Borders, these were kind of the biggest ones that we need to address. So anxiety disorders, types like generalized anxiety, panic disorder, and etc. These have immense symptoms and impact on daily life. When you're in school and you have a major anxiety disorder, it could be hard to perform tasks such as, simply doing your homework or simply, taking a test. That's why even issues that it may seem that many people have, it's still important to consider that, and it's still important to address that. One big one that I mentioned in the statistics from the previous slide, depression, common symptoms, persistent sadness, loss of interest, excessive sleeping, and etc. These have major risk factors that need to be addressed again. And the depression rates in teenagers is blasting up the roofs. And that's why, it's important to take a stand. Now, this one is very important. And this one, oftentimes when I talk about this issue, people don't consider this with mental health, but it really is. And more of a reason to actually, create policy changes effectively with this one in schools too. So eating disorders, some types, anorexia, bulimia, binge eatings. This has major, not only psychological, but physical effects. And it's rampant amongst teenagers. The highest rate of eating disorders is actually in ages 12 to 24. So that just comes to fact that youth are really suffering when it comes to these variety of mental health issues. Then it's substance abuse. This is another big one. Like I said, many teenagers in this day and age have common substance and associated risks, whether it be drugs, whether it be alcohol. And again, that's very important to consider. When you consider all these facts together, it shows how much all these mental health issues are affecting the youth. You hear about these every day, whether it be your friend, your neighbor, but when they all come together, it just shows what this epidemic is doing to our youth, not only in our local cities, but just thinking nationally. And this is really a global issue if you think about it. And then finally, self-harm and suicidal thoughts, the risk factors, warning signs, and it's very important for immediate intervention. The best way to address all of these is really making sure that there's a proper outlet in the schools and communities. Many people don't have access to the generalized mental health resources. So that think therapists, think psychiatrists, psychologists. So many people don't have access, not only like financial reasons, but there is very few, especially in my community. I know that there aren't many psychiatrists and not many therapists available at hand. So it's really important to put in resources and give guidance in where students spend the most time, and that is schools. And we'll talk more about that. Next slide, please. So what are some contributing factors? And this is coming from the perspective of teenagers. Some of these are general, of course, you would suggest this, but really these are the most important factors when you look at mental health issues in a wide perspective. So of course, there's biological factors, the genetic predispositions to mental health disorders, and that's again very important to consider. Minds Without Borders is proud to partner with multiple research groups to actually research various biological mental health mental health research projects. I think that's very important that we also kind of have a focus on the biological factors and the importance of psychiatrists in today's society and the impact of brain chemistry on mental health. So research is a big, passion of mine. So I really like to see the trends of the biology with the mental health aspect. And a lot of times people don't even, suggest that. So when we spend our time, give money to research, that could really be doing an impact on the mental health spectrum as well. Then there's environmental factors, of course, family dynamics, support systems, school dynamics, relationships, big importance, school environment and academic pressures. I can speak firsthand that in today's world, the school environment and the academic pressure is going off the roof with the competitive college acceptances, with, the competitive environment that we live in. There's bound to be, anxiety, mental health disorders. And I can see that in my current school. I can see that with my friends who have, these issues just because of the status quo in today's society. And then that goes right into social circles and peer influence. That's one of the major ones. And that goes to, kind of into social media. And, when you see this, era, the digital era, there's socioeconomic factors as well. Like I mentioned, not a lot of people can actually access a therapist, a regular therapist, or a psychiatrist. So the access to healthcare and resources is extremely important. That's why I'm proud that NAMI Go, Minds Without Borders, all these mental health nonprofits come together and actually create change for this. Economic stability and its impact on mental health. Having a, status quo life, I would say, is very important. And when you're not able to sustain yourself, of course, you can go down that path. And then lastly, which is very important, especially for teenagers, is that cultural and societal pressures. I think, the stigma, which you can see internationally and globally, and I'll talk more about that, but globally, you can see that there's still stigma around mental health. I can give an anecdote, actually. In India, I'm trying to increase there. My family is originally from India, and it's very important for me to actually, do work there. I think that it's so incredibly important to work in those different countries and see the mental health spectrum there. I was talking to some students who actually work for Minds Without Borders in India, and when they advocate so easily like I'm doing here, a lot of times they're looked down upon. They're called, if you have a mental health issue, you're called crazy, or you're called, you need to get help, or, you're wrong in the head. And it's all the stigma because of that culture in India and culture in all these different countries who don't have access to actually talk about this on a big platform, which is what's one good thing that's happening right now in the US. We're able to actually, advocate for this without having that stigma and without having that societal norms. It's very hard for students to actually advocate in our other countries. So we have to find different plans to actually effectively do something. And I think that's a problem. And I think it won't be fixed over time. It's going to be needing a lot of advocacy, a lot of talking about it, normalizing it, because mental health does equal physical health. But that's a major problem. And so when you're not able, when you feel that this is wrong, if you have a mental health issue in India or in any other country that stigmatizes it, then you're not able to access health. And that's where everything kind of goes wrong. So next slide. So now I want to get into stigma. I think, like I was talking about before, people don't even consider this, and it's really important. It really is, because many people won't get mental health treatment just because of stigma, just because of how we perceive it in society, just because, oh, you know, you're receiving therapy, that's not equivalent to a doctor's appointment, but it really is. It really should be. And I stress that fact. And that's what major thing that we do is just talk, we advocate. And I really think that's the best way. I think that's the best action, just talking about it, especially like something like mental health. If you just talk about it like I'm doing right now, I think that shows other individuals that they can talk about it, and it creates that chain. And the impact of stigma, I mean, everywhere, the barriers to seeking help, the effects on self-esteem and recovery, it's insane. And it's sad that, you know, other students cannot do what I'm doing here in America. And I hope to change that. That's why, you know, we were able to grow globally, because we want to help students give those resources. So in Egypt, in India, and France, they can actually create change. Mental health is not something that's just in the United States. It's everywhere. And that's why we need strong advocates everywhere to advocate for policy changes, awareness campaigns, and etc. So what are the ways to combat stigma? What Minds Without Borders is doing is education and awareness campaigns. We like to talk about it. We like to go out in schools and talk about various mental health issues. Of course, you know, being approved, we like to have open discussion about it. We think that's so important, just talking about mental health. Of course, if the individuals feel comfortable, and showing that there are people who have been through it. There are people who have recovered. There are people who are there to help. And they're students too. They're in the same shoes. Fostering an inclusive and supportive community, making sure that these people know that they can receive help, encouraging open conversations about mental health, making sure that when these students talk, that they know that it's all, you know, it's for a good conversation. It's making sure that they're getting help. It's not, you know, to do anything other than that motive. I want to share another anecdote with this stigma concept. When I do regular checkup calls with some of the leaders in Minds Without Borders, one of the India directors was having a really hard time actually getting more students involved and getting, you know, many individuals to actually come and participate and advocate with their leaders, with the governmental leaders. And this was actually happening in medical school. So in a medical school, that's where the India leader is. He was not able to actually, you know, garner that attention just because of the fact that it was so stigmatized, even though they were studying psychiatry, psychology, and all of that. Even though they were studying that, it's still very stigma. They don't want to talk about it. They want to study it because, you know, there's a demand for that, of course, but even reaching that is insane. One of the people that we actually interviewed on our Minds Without Borders podcast was an Indian psychiatrist. And she actually practiced in the UK as well. And she provided us insight on the difference between the cultural norms and when people come to her. She has more patients come to her in the UK than in India. That's why she goes to the UK to practice. And that just speaks to the cultural norms. And that's something that we need to change. And we change by talking about it more. So next slide. So I want to talk about the importance of early intervention. And when I say early intervention, that means talk in schools. You know, early intervention means in schools and making sure that schools have a program set up. A lot of times, you know, one of the major backlash that I've gotten for doing something advocacy like this or for this nonprofit when I was building this up was, of course, the political implications of this. Mental health shouldn't be taught in schools, or mental health shouldn't be a huge focus. It takes away from education times. As students, we actually did surveys, so I can attest to the numbers as well. I really disagree with that, just because we spend 8 hours in school And when you go home, you know, you don't have that regular access unless you have that therapist. So making sure that there's a program put in schools is one of the key priorities for student success. And benefits of early detection. So I think that it starts in middle schools, and you can go as early as elementary schools depending on the type of mental health disorder. That's up to the psychiatrist, of course, but improve treatment outcomes, and it reduces the long-term impact on well-being. And then I think the role of parents, teachers, and peers, all of these stakeholders must come together and effectively have a program put in place that can actually effectively do something. I'm not talking just a presentation, another psychology lesson about the numbers of suicide statistics, but actually one-on-one support, peer support. I wouldn't say, people say, oh, so you're proposing peer therapy. I wouldn't say it's peer therapy. I say it's open discussions, not just about your own personal mental health issues, but what you see, whether it be practicing gratitude or, you know, taking a certain medication. I think it's important to just talk about this in a whole, you know, conversation. And it's so important to create a supportive environment for disclosure. A lot of times, public school students, and again, we did a survey on this, they don't feel comfortable talking to their school counselor, or even some schools who are lucky to have a school psychiatrist. They don't feel comfortable just because they barely know the person. But if you talk with their peers, if you talk with the teachers that you see every day, there's a more better chance for one to open up. In schools, I go to a public school, so we really focus on public schools. We have a couple private school students, but in schools, the only really like mental health thing that they promote is contact your guidance counselor or call this hotline or all of that. But let's just be real. Are students really going to do that if they feel hindered, if they feel, you know, stigmatized, which there's still that environment, even in Florida public high schools. So next slide. So what we've been working on and what we are slowly working with different school districts to actually, you know, circle out was a prevention and resilience building. So the Florida Department of Education, they've already, and we've actually been able to lobby with we've, you know, work with legislators hand in hand, but they've, for this new year, they've put out a resilience kind of training, and we kind of, we appreciate that, and we go based on that in Florida. But like I said, we have chapters all over the globe. But what we want to propose to schools and what we have been doing, we've been working in, just a background, we've been working in Brevard County in Florida, because I think someone asked that in the chat. Brevard County, Miami-Dade County, Seminole County, and Orange County. We have students working hand in hand with the school board, with the superintendent, to actually work for a more mental health friendly environment. But what we are kind of based on, or what our like plan is to actually do prevention and resilience building. So think life skills. Instead of the stereotypical teach students about statistics and teach students that, you know, there's a counselor or reach out to a friend, we want to teach students real-time skills that not only just help them with mental health problems, but also with life. So building resilience in youth, making sure that we can develop coping skills, problem solving abilities, psychosocial skills. How can one, you know, conserve or, you know, conserve with one another? How can one, you know, deal with whether it be a bad grade on a test or drug abuse or relationship issues? How can one actually come back from all of these common problems that happen in youth? Then promoting a healthy lifestyle. I think that's very important for mental health. I think that, you know, people oftentimes overlook this, but making sure proper nutrition, exercise, and adequate sleep. That's still, you know, people might think, oh, that's like common knowledge, but no, many students still need that reinforcement, which can only happen in schools. And again, fostering a supportive environment. So what we are doing that is different is that in my county, for example, we're actually having students being the teachers, essentially. We're having a couple of students at each school who are student leaders who actually go into homerooms and teach students what we are doing, how you can become an advocate, and how to actually, you know, develop these skills, whether it be through a presentation or whether bringing guest speakers. So like a psychiatrist, for example, came to one of our schools and was talking about the importance of sleep on mental health and the importance of this. We work with other people, Bob Doppler. He's the director of the International Transformational Resilience Committee, and he's a big, you know, advocate for Minds Without Borders. He was able to Zoom call into one of our schools to talk about the importance of gaining resilience in high school before you go to college and you're independent. And this isn't like, in no way are we saying that this is the perfect solution to mental health, but this is the most effective in schools. And this is the most, people will actually agree to spend time out of the curriculum to teach this. It's so important that we have something put in place. And if we don't have anything at all and simply just a counselor available on hand, that is really not doing anything to the problem. We need a program that is accessible to everyone, not just people who want to go to these presentations or go to these meetings or this club. We need a program that is actually put into the curriculum, put into the Florida Department of Education, like books that everyone can have access to. Everyone can know this information. Another thing that we're looking to do is all of these counties that we're actually partnering with, we're looking for ways to implement this life building skills in the English language books. So, for example, we're researching books that actually teach resilience skills and life building skills. And then we're, proposing that to actually be part of the English language curriculum for different grades. And that's just one aspect. That's the most important, especially in schools, considering the political environment. It's so important when you need a kind of an effective solution that makes everyone happy. I'm really proud of the bipartisan support that we've actually been able to get. We're able to work with legislators from all parts of the political spectrum. We're able to work with school board members. And a lot of people like this idea. A lot of people think that, it's a great way to actually do something without the still that stigma about mental health. I think that it's really sad if you're looking at the underlying reason why we have to do that it's because a lot of parents or a lot of teachers don't feel comfortable teaching mental health. I think that's sad, but I think in the future, hopefully, when we go through a more inclusive environment and actually, talk more about mental health, hopefully our next generations can have a very open environment and have those resources readily available. So next slide. So now I want to talk about some of my favorite parts. I think this is something that's so unique and many people don't consider this, but advocacy in mental health and mental health in politics really has a bigger perspective or a bigger correlation than anyone thinks of. Making sure that legislators are aware of how important mental health issues are to you and to your community is more important now than ever. Legislators and even superintendents, school board members, elected officials, I should say, elected officials have one of the biggest stakeholding in mental health. They can really create main policies that can actually affect, changes, whether it be giving funding to a nonprofit or giving funding to a certain group, or whether it be actually putting up policies in place. Mental health, politics, advocacy, and legislation has everything in hand. And regardless of your age, we like to lobby together youth to advocate for this, for more youth-specific mental health issues. But regardless of your age, we should all encourage each other to be advocates for mental health with our local elected officials, with our state officials, and with our government officials. So I want to talk about a wide variety of ways about how you can be an advocate and advocate for a variety of things with mental health. And then I'll talk about an action plan where you can start today. So the next slide. So the biggest thing, and this is why, Minds Without Borders started, I wanted to make sure that, people could actually talk about mental health without that. Advocacy reduces stigma. When you are a mental health advocate, you work to break down the societal stigmas and misconceptions surrounding mental health. And that promotes understanding, empathy, and a general consideration that mental health is a valid, it's a valid thing to talk about. And still in our society, I want to stress the fact that stigma still exists. I've seen it as in the mental health space working here, I've seen that people still feel uneasy about talking about mental health, and not just about their personal mental health issues, but mental health as a whole. And when you advocate for it, and when you talk about it, whether it be doing a public comment at your school board meetings, or a public comment with your county commissioners, or even at the city hall, it shows to your elected leaders that this is something that our constituents care about, and this is something that we should address. So when you advocate for it, it essentially promotes access to care, bringing me to my next point. It seeks to ensure that mental health services are accessible and available to all individuals, regardless of their socioeconomic status or location. So one thing I also encourage you to all do, and I hope to speak with you after, is go and give those public comments, whether it be at that city hall meeting, county commissioners, or school board. A lot of students in Minds Without Borders, I'm proud that they go to their county commissioners and actually just talk about how important mental health is. Sometimes some of the county commissioners will reach out to have a meeting to see how can they do something in their county. And I think that's so special. Just when, when adults, or even when anyone sees someone so passionate about something, they'll be more inclined to help. And when you become an advocate, they'll want to help because of, it's important to you. So essentially they see that through your words and through speaking. So I think that's important. Advocacy, which promotes access to care. And I want to, touch on the socioeconomic part. Mental health is extremely barrierized, like Minds Without Borders, and I can talk about the name later, but when you getting access to care is essentially only for the rich, or the quote unquote wealthy. It's only for those individuals who actually have access and money to spend on it. But like I mentioned before, a lot of times economic status is one of the biggest contributions to lower mental health decline. So having a universal access to care is so important. And then that goes to advocacy drives policy changes. Mental health advocates work to influence policies that govern mental health services, leading to an improved standard of care and support. So like I said, Minds Without Borders hopes to bring a coalition of students to not only go to whether it be Tallahassee or the respective, state capital, but we hope to go to DC in this upcoming session to actually advocate for a couple of mental health bills on the docket. Because when you see that students who are the key stakeholders for a mental health bill, and when you hear students talk about it, I think that, legislators and elected officials will be more inclined to act on that because they say, hey, this is not a waste of federal funding. This is so important to them. This will actually create change, making a happier, healthier society. So that just comes to show how important advocacy is. Next slide. Now, a couple more points. So advocacy also addresses systematic barriers. I talked about the socioeconomic standards, but it addresses the systematic barriers that hinder individuals from receiving timely mental health care. When one talks about in their city about how the homeless individuals are, not receiving the proper, whether it be healthcare or mental health care, it actually, it triggers an alarm in that, elected officials' brain that, oh, this is something we need to act on. This is something to make our city better. I'm a big advocate for grassroots activism. A lot of our students, they want to work on the state level, or a lot of people don't think that they can create real change just based on a local level or working with their school. But I am really against that, because when you or an individual just goes to your local, whoever your higher up is, whether it be your boss at a job and you want some corporate mental health care, whether it be your school principal or school superintendent, or even, your mayor or your county commissioners, I think when you talk on a local grassroots level, you're able to make more change fast, and then slowly you can work your way up to the state and federal level. We're a big pusher for that. We want to make sure that there are student coalitions established at local levels, because when you make local change, you'll make more effective state and federal and then global change. And I'm proud to facilitate all of that. I think that I want to mention how important having a team and having this coalition of students. Even though I started Minds Without Borders, I'm so proud of the students who all work and advocate for this, because they're their own leaders. I just facilitate this, but they're really the ones who are making the real change. And I think that's something that should be applauded for. Advocacy supports suicide prevention. I know that it was just Suicide Awareness Month, and that's something also to consider, but mental health advocacy plays a critical role in raising awareness about suicide prevention and lobbying for resources to combat this public health issue. Advocacy also empowers peer support. It fosters the growth of peer support networking, recognizing the values of individuals with lived experiences. One of the most important things and powerful things I've seen is that a lot of our students who have faced severe mental health issues, when they speak and they talk about the recovery and they talk about how being an advocate actually helps them recover, it's so powerful to me. One thing is I've had a student who works with us from Alabama, And she talked at her local with the governor, actually, like in a joint meeting. She talked about her current, like, her issues and her problems, and how that wanted her to create change for other students facing that. And then she mentioned that through advocacy, she was able to feel more fulfilled and was more impacted to help other people. And that's something that's so special. And that's just a testament to how important speaking up and your words are. So next slide. And then just a couple more, don't have to touch on advocacy, influence, mental health education. That's what we're doing real time at Minds Without Borders. We're actually able to work with our legislators. We're getting approval from the school board to actually work with these school psychiatrists to put up advocate mental health issues or mental health curriculum and mental health, coping skills and etc. It promotes research and innovation. Another thing that we hope to continue doing as we grow and get more funding is Minds Without Borders wants to give back to research institutions that are focusing on mental health work. I personally want to work in one of those labs and see how, like I mentioned before, the biological processes affects mental health and all of that. I think that's so important. And a lot of times we look over that fact that when we have innovation and when we promote this research, I think that's something that's so special. And I hope to see that, increase the funding for that, whether it be, through federal grants or through, advocacy. And these three kind of go in together. Advocacy supports all special populations, children and youth and individuals. It empowers them. It empowers individuals to advocate for their own mental health needs, providing them with resources and tools to navigate the mental health system. Without becoming an advocate and without seeing the power of advocacy and resilience and youth empowerment, I would have never been where I am today, because through mental health advocacy, I've not only found myself, but I've been able to help people, and it's really given me a joy and satisfaction. I'm really proud of all of the students that now work with Minds Without Borders, all of the students a part, whether it be our chapter leaders, shout out to all of them, or whether it be our international leaders, and then also our executive team. All of them work so hard, but it's all driven by passion, a passion to make change, a passion to, create this global movement of more mental health awareness and mental health access. And that's something that's so special. It's so special to me. And I think that having that impact on everyone is so important. So the next slide. So now I know I've been talking, we're coming to the close to the presentation, but I want to touch more about Minds Without Borders. Here's my contact information. I think if you guys have any questions, and we'll have some time for questions, I hope, at the end. But here's my contact information. I know a lot of you guys work in the mental health space, so I'd love to talk about your insight from me. I'm really open to constructive criticism. I think that that's so important also to gain, to know what people think about this organization since they're veterans. And then I hope that you guys can share this with any students or any young adults. Like I said, 12 to 24 is what we hope to get involved, but we really have adults working with us to help. So I hope you guys can join us on this global movement to make mental health more accessible. And then follow us on our social medias. So I think there's one more slide. I want to say thank you for your support and time. And I always like to preference with this, but I'm not a mental health professional. So anything discussed in this, please make sure that, you take it with I'm a senior in high school. So just take that with a grain of salt, and please reach out to your mental health counselor or help, or visit any of these hotlines for any other questions. But if you have a more specific question for me, I'd love to take that now, if that's okay, Megan, if we have some time for questions.
Absolutely. We certainly have time for questions. Thank you so much for that informative and inspiring conversation around mental health and the importance of advocacy amongst our youth. Yeah, there's so much to reflect on. I learned a lot. And I'm definitely ready to help you to facilitate some questions. What do you all want to know from Anjani before we close this out?
So I see one from Miss Jill Carroll. Not sure if she's here, but I'll still answer it. It was, how many chapters are there in Florida? What counties, what schools? So in Florida, it's more like a student lead. They start their representative, whether it be for their school, community. A lot of times students like to represent their school. And then it's, I wouldn't say more like chapters, more just representatives and coalition of students. Because a lot of times you can't have mental health clubs, which is really sad. In Florida, you can't, have that outside of the curriculum. So we like to have these student representatives, and then they bring a coalition of students, and then they go talk. Like I said, they advocate for this. They spread around resources. They write blogs, podcasts, newsletters. So yeah, and then like I mentioned, counties, we're in, I want to say, so we're getting into Leon County, I know that, but Brevard County, Orange County, Seminole County, Miami-Dade County, and then kind of emerging in Pinellas County as well. So we trying to have the whole spectrum of Florida.
So I got a question for you. So you mentioned, getting into a lot of the counties and getting into the school boards. Excuse me. As you may know, NAMI has our Ending the Silence program, which we're super proud of. And, we've been really working hard to get that into a ton more schools, as are a bunch of the other affiliates. What do you say has been working with the school boards on, getting more involved with them? We really hope over the next, year, 2-3 years to be in all the schools. We've made a lot of good inroads this year in doing that. But I guess so really two parts. What's worked for you to get, into the schools, and two, where do you see, any potential overlap between what, NAMI affiliates are doing with Ending the Silence and the work that you're doing?
Of course. So actually I talked to Megan and also, who's the other one again? Sorry, Madeline, Megan and Madeline. So I talked to it, and that's something that we love working with other organizations, especially local ones. And to answer your first part of the question, it was hard. I think that the main thing was we were students, and we were getting so much students in their respective counties, and then they were like kind of, going to these school board meetings and giving those public comments, and then having that support from the principal. I think it's different when you're a student versus when you're like a outside organization, I guess. I think both are so important. I think NAMI Go and the Ending the Silence is such an important thing, but I think having students being the facilitators of that is what really changes it. Because sometimes, politicians, they say with the promise to serve every student. So when students have a voice, which is very not rare today, and the students won't come and talk about their school, they won't come to the school board. That's not very, that's not what you would do with your Thursday night. But when you have a actual coalition of students that we work hard to actually establish, coming and talking and getting that support, not demanding, but trying to have meetings with these school board members, having these proposals, I think that's what's effective. They see it in the students' eye that mental health is important. They see it that we need to have this is what the students want in our county. This is what the students want in our schools. It's still very hard. I'm not saying that a lot of it is just trying to bring more students together, and then they want to go and reach out in their proposals. A lot of times they give us different ideas on how would it be best in their county. Miami-Dade County and Orange County, very different. They have different needs, different requirements, different people leading it. So it's important to also we as students, we also may know that we don't test our limits. We make sure that we're still considering what they're saying. We ask to have a kind of a like using this and giving our proposal to them, we ask, what can you do to help us facilitate our goals? And that's been very effective. But to answer your question, I think it's just getting those students to actually be facilitators. And overlapping, we can talk for long, but I think there's a lot of overlap. I think if you have students like Minds Without Borders representing this program and actually allowing us to implement this in schools, I think that there could be a possible, we can have some success with that.
Thank you.
Problem. Just looking at the chat.
Yeah,
Megan,
I do. I want to ask a follow-up question. I think this kind of touches on what Jill also put in the chat. So, I mean, clearly having a peer-to-peer program with youth comes with its own set of challenges. And as a youth, you're able to kind of, you're using this really interesting distributed organizing method to kind of like navigate this tricky and really layered stigmatic situation. So I think, something that is interesting and something that will need to be considered is how involved are the parents? How involved are the what do you call them? The counselors, the school counselors. So Jill's question verbatim, does the student who wants to talk to one of these trained advocates have to have permission from their parent? And is what the youth talked about shared with the parents? So it's a two-part question, but I think it just really touched on a lot of things. And I was hoping you would just speak to that briefly.
Of course, that's very important because, of course, parents, especially in Florida with the Parental Education Rights Act, we always have to consider that. And a lot of what we do, it's different in Florida versus other states I've seen, and it's also different in county versus county. So I would say the more direct in schools, we're still on the kind of the rolling out basis, whether it be like the direct curriculum. What I would say with the curriculum and what we do in schools that the parents know about is we are a couple of student representatives. We work hand in hand with the school psychiatrists who actually make the curriculum, the current curriculum. And they usually people don't know it's us. It's just to provide that student perspective. So that's what it is. And parents do know about the mental health, like the whole curriculum thing. And in terms of the other things, this is happening outside of school hours, but it's happening with the support of the schools. So a lot of times, I know in my county, I think this is everywhere, parents have to now sign permission forms for everything. So it's been hard to like kind of navigate that, but we are more right now because of the current in Florida specifically is really that community events. Like I mentioned, we're going to be having a panel on November 2nd at a school with school support, but of course it's on your own, it's after hours. So that's what it is. It's so important that I still think that parents should be stakeholders in it. To an extent, of course, I think that that's also important to consider because you are your own individual. And I feel strongly about that, essentially you should be making to an extent, what decisions you should be making for yourself, whether that be mental health or anything. But parents definitely should be informed about whatever it is. A lot of it, what we do is research, getting the feedback on our stakeholders. So we've actually sent out a research, like a survey to Brevard Public School students and parents to test what would they want to see for their students. A lot of them like the resilience platform and the life building skills. And I think that's great. And a lot of people are aware slowly as we emerge in the community about that. But of course, getting the approval from parents should be important because we're still minors, of course.
It just really speaks volumes to the true intersectionality of everything that you're doing. You're really checking all the boxes to make sure you're doing it right. You're being intentional about moving forward. You're taking this very seriously. And I think that is just such an inspiring model that you are, an example that you're setting. So thank you so much just for speaking to that.
Thank you. No, thank you. And I think that it also, like, another thing I want to say is how important advocates, I mean, NAMI Go, both you, Freddie, Madeline, all of you guys, Megan, you guys are all advocates as well, just talking about it, facilitating this, and all of you guys just coming to this and hearing my words are advocates too, because when you listen to this, I hope that you guys take this information, whether you share it with your loved ones, share it with your community, and become your own advocate for whether it just be mental health. I think that's so important. I hope that, all of you guys can take this information and actually do good in this. I see what Robert asked, what is next for you and what is your succession plan? Thank you all for that you do for me. So what is next for me? So right now I'm applying to college. I want to continue advocacy and I want to study like political science and public health. I hope to become a legislator in the future, but I definitely want to, educate myself more about the current issues, focusing on mental health, of course, because mental health is public health. So I want to study both of those, study the intersections, like mentioned before, and I want to do more research. Like mentioned, I really want to see what the different research possibilities, and then I want to go into legislation to be able to make an impact on as many people as I can and continue nonprofit advocacy. So yeah.
Thank you so much. We're so excited for you and for your future. Oh, here we go. Someone I know is a part of a mental health initiative at the White House. Many good things are happening for the youth. Absolutely. And I think you're a prime example of what we have to look forward to in the coming decades. I think we're certainly in good hands when it comes to our mental health.
I hope
So-
so in the future that we have a more, inclusive society where we can talk more and have more meetings like this and, meet in person. Yeah.
Ready?
And Angie, I would love to speak to you some more in the next couple months. I'm gonna in late November, I'm gonna have the opportunity to go to DC and meet with our senators, but also a couple other on some health and human services committee. So yeah, I'd love to hear, just some of your perspective, not obviously not here, but we can set up a call where, just get some of your perspective, what works, what doesn't work, because I think this is what you've presented on today combined with what some of the stuff NAMI's doing and some other, I think youth is where it starts. We know that, most mental health is gonna, start, when you're, 14, 15, 16, 17 in that age range. And, of everyone that is impacted by mental health, they're gonna, 50% of them start symptoms, by time they're 12 years old, as early as 12 years old. So definitely love to connect with you more on this.
I would love to do that too. I will, right after this, we'll plan that. And I couldn't say in different words. Thank you for giving me this platform, because a lot of time people overlook the impact of mental health on youth. A lot of people think, oh, they're too young to even know about these issues, or they haven't gone through, taxes or life, like all of this. And I just
So
think that
resilient. They'll be fine. They're tough.
exactly. They're still young. I think that that's obviously wrong. And I think that like Freddie said, like everyone is saying, we just need to spread light to this issue. So if anyone, anything you can take out of this presentation, I think is just speak up for these issues, become an advocate, be a, champion mental health issues, whether it be for your community, whether you LGBTQ, a woman, children, youth. I think champion these mental health issues and make sure that your voice is heard to your legislators and also to your community. That's the biggest thing.
That's right. We all have a role to play.
Of course.
Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you, Anjani, for shedding such light, such beautiful radiance on all of these critical issues. And yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. We will be right back here next month. And we hope to see you all at some of our other MIAW events this week.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Namigo. Thank you, Megan and Freddie for hosting and facilitating this. And thank you all for coming. So yeah.
Thank you.
Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you. No,
Hey, Angelo.
Say hi. She knows your name. No, you're shy.
Oh, you are? All right, awesome. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you.
All right.